I'm versus game sense on CS:GO. I'm gonna start with this. Just aim or game sense. Of course, the answer he says aim, game sense, or blend both. I mean, the answer is clear. Just blend both. It's like
Hey, this is Vu, and recently
it's
my
a
clip on aim
no-brainer.
versus game sense has been the basis of a lot of debate. Basically, the the reality of CS is everyone wishes CS was like this fucking cool chess game, but at the end of the day, if one team shoots the other team better in the head, they can basically just run around like fucking absolute morons and win. Now, I will admit this is a pretty basic way to look at the concept. However, just about every MDL and above player I know mostly or entirely agrees. But to convince you, let me start by looking at what actually is aim. Well, at the most basic, aim is, well, aim. It's your ability to point and click when people.
Wait a second.
Hey, this is Vu, and recently my clip on aim versus game sense has been the basis of a lot of debate. Basically, the the reality of CS is everyone wishes CS was like this fucking cool chess game, but at the end of the day, if one team shoots the other team better in the head, they can basically just run around like fucking absolute morons and win. Now, I will
Just gonna quickly talk about this because game sense involves your map knowledge, your like positioning and turn around corners, and is basically game sense. You need to know where to be and how to pick and all this shit. If you just have aim, of course, of course, if you can like just shoot the other team, but if they put themselves on better corners, better places, and your team doesn't know, they just can shoot you faster than they did. Probably, probably there is a if the other team is better, so much better at aim than one team, they can ignore some rules, right? But if the level is the same, both teams have the same level of aim, and one team knows how to position themselves and use a strategy, and the other not. We know where we gonna win. But if someone has so much better aim than the other team, you know what happens. Even if the noob uh, knows how to position, if he cannot aim, he cannot win the game. It's just like, but if you combine both, it's like you have a unbeatable team, right? It's like I
admit
don't
this
know.
is a pretty basic way to look at the concept. However, just about every MDL and above player I know mostly or entirely agrees. But to convince you, let me start by looking at what actually is aim. Well, at the most basic, aim is, well, aim. It's your ability to point and click when people are on your screen. However, when you're playing an enemy, what do you think of as their aim? Well, the answer is probably that their entire package of mechanics will seem to you to be their aim. It's the question of how fast do they kill me when we take a
Yeah, that's normally what people think it is, but I I see that you're gonna go to that point really quickly. It's just like when I realized that aim is not just like game, right? When I realized that the movement they do, the position they have, helps them to to aim better, no, to kill you. It's just not this aim. It's just like everything, the whole package. But you're gonna go through this. I didn't see the video, but I already know
straight
where
up
it's going.
engagement. This is really the basis of my statement in that clip. So I think the basis of a lot of the debate comes down to the definition of aim and the definition of game sense. Is your aim simply your point and click ability, or is it your entire package of mechanics? Mechanics being movement, aim, and recoil control. I think for the most part, while it seems counterintuitive, because those have such a bearing on aim, it has to be the entire package. Alright, so let's take a look at a play for a minute. Here we've got a little noob named Vu. That can't be right. Whatever. He's got a fantastic play here. He's lurked through a smoke, he's directly behind someone, and now he's dead. Okay, I get it. That's a ridiculous example, but it is relevant to keep in mind. It doesn't matter how good your game sense is if you simply can't shoot your opponent. This actually applies to a higher level than you might think as well. You can often see this in the highest levels of semi pro gameplay, especially if the opposing team can simply out aim you, they can push everything, and you will absolutely struggle. Think back to a time when Liquid was actually good and they played a tier 2 team. This struggle is something most IGLs will know as making your opponent respect you or something along those lines, where if your opponent can simply push every angle and win 40-60 gunfights against you, there's no reason for them to stop, and if they don't stop, you can't begin playing overly tactically. They'll just continue pushing and flank you anytime you set up a strat. The standard way to counter this is to run a competent default without having your players get picked off. This will literally require you to actually be able to win some reasonably straight up gunfights. That's kind of the point of a default. Don't give up too many openings to enemy oppers and set your riflers into engagements that they should win or trade. Alright, so if you don't win enough of the engagements you should, you're not going to be able to get much done. Of course, we already knew that. The basic concept here, though, is that aim is the base skill of Counter-Strike. No matter how smart you play, if your opponent's mechanics are enough better than yours, you are going to lose. In fact, your game sense may even hurt you because your opponents will simply push things in ways that make little to no sense and you shouldn't generally be expecting. Let's take a game I played recently to showcase this. This is a group of Face It.
And what he said now is just like when your aim is so much better than your adversary that he can outmaneuver you, right? He like look at you and like, well, my aim. I know that mechanically I'm better than them aim wise, so I just gonna push them like a madman, right? It's just like is when there is this disparity of skill, and it's like, yeah, at that point, yes, aim gonna be great because it's like you can ignore the fact that even if your adversary is better on game sense, just kind of rush him, and he'd be like, "Wow, but that doesn't make sense. He does doing that. He look like a madman, and I'm still losing." And I saw a lot of people mad because of this, because of people ignoring some rules, and because they trust the mechanics, they get away. What is if the skill is equal or the opportunity? Sometimes that's what some high level players don't realize. It's just like if the opportunity is like, I mean, they realize because they've been on those situations, right? After some point, but sometimes I still heard them complain, right? It's easy to complain, right? When you somebody does something that is not, because that's the difference. Sometimes the higher level players saying that playing against a new player is sometimes more difficult than play against like a pro because he gonna have this set of rules that a new player doesn't know and he just gonna do whatever and gonna be unpredictable. And sometimes, well, that works, and that's the case.
Tens versus a 5 stack of MDL players.
I
Several
mean, that's the case. No, sometimes people can do crazy stuff. That this guy is a madman. That makes no sense, and they still lose against them because I mean, it's not what they should do. And sometimes, well, that not doing the correct stuff sometimes will get you the win. But for most part, the rule set was set for a reason, not just so you don't die a stupid death. But continue.
of whom I coached fairly recently. I should be able to stand up on 2 feet game sense wise, you would think. However, we got rolled over 16-3. You can see if we take a look at round 10 here, they go for a B rush, and then a market rush, and then a CT rush through a Molotov. Not exactly a ton of super smart play being made there. Now, obviously, they are fighting against pistols, but you can see that part of the problem is that you're not expecting them to run through a molly, you get caught off guard, and they destroy you because they already know they can push those angles and win disadvantageous gunfights to begin with.
And at this point, he's talking
Alright, so you
about
can't get
somebody
anywhere
that
without
has better
some
aim than the other team.
Cool story,
right?
Vu. Here's a question though. Is crosshair placement aim or game sense? I found that this question actually gets to the bottom of some of the debate. If crosshair placement is aim, it seems pretty natural that the game primarily
No, it's
revolves
game
around
sense.
aim. If crosshair placement is game,
Because crosshair placement only matters mostly on CS:GO, right? Like it's a game sense thing from CS:GO because most of the other shooters, quote unquote, they are battle royales. They doesn't matter where you put the fucking crosshair. I mean, it matters because you still need to take angles, and having that knowledge will help you to predict your opponent movement when you basically try to shoot him like a wall and through a wall. No, basically, it's not through a wall. Is when you like Imagine on Fortnite, for example, that you know where the guy can peek, right? And you just place the cross as close to the I don't know, maybe the building that you're doing, and you are building and you are putting your crosshair close to the places where you're. It still is a quote unquote. I'm gonna say game sense. I would say it's just a technique to get the shot faster. If it's only for CS:GO, no, but keeping the cursor on the head level on the horizontal level plane, and I mean that is vertical. You know what I mean? The head level, your cursor basically moves on the horizontal, like this guy here, right? He's shooting balls all on in line, right? And that's a game sense thing on CS:GO.
Game
Uh,
sense, well,
Let me say what he says.
that's a lot of what goes into your aim, so surely the game is more about game sense. And it seems to depend who you ask. Surprisingly to me, the results of the poll on Twitter I did on this were very close, with GameSense only coming out on top with 60% of the vote.
Only, I mean, let's be honest. That's like 60%. It's not only, bro. What are you talking about? There is 10% that didn't even respond to that question because 30, 60 is like 90. So,
The
whatever.
problem is that crosshair placement is a bit of both, and is really the reason it's hard to answer whether aim is more important than game sense. Not that crosshair placement requires
Oh, the question is, oh, what is more important? I mean, none of them is more important than the other. None. It's just like you have to be both. Like,
more than the most basic level of aim to execute, but that your aim will dictate where your crosshair should be, where you can position, and more than that as well. Your
but
aim and
this
game
is
sense are nearly inseparable. Let's
yeah,
take a look at a couple
basically.
of players that are slightly worse than me, Zipnix and Esitag, the classic Astralis combination from 6 months ago when I wrote this. The reason I'm looking at these two players isn't which player is better, it has a lot more to do with the angles they take in their defense. If we take a look at
This is
Zipnix
game
holding
sense.
ramp on Nuke, you can see that there are a few specific angles he enjoys playing. You'll note these angles are very close to cover and extremely non-committal, like my relationships. It's very easy for Zipnix to use these angles to make contact and quickly drop into lower and survive, as good ramp players typically should. On the other hand, Esitag is willing to take some slightly more aggressive engagements, which are a bit more committed, and he's willing to stay longer, as well as hold on to his utility a little bit longer as well. Alright, Esitag has better aim, but there's obviously some requirement of game sense to correctly apply your aim to the best of its ability. If Esitag played the angles that Zipnix played, he likely wouldn't be able to clutch quite as effectively, so he'd be selling himself short as a player. The ability to recognize and capitalize on the engagements that your aim allows you to take is at the
Yeah,
core.
and this is what I was talking about before. Sometimes, like this guy as a tech or whatever the name is, he knows that his aim is a little bit better than his adversaries, right? So he can take a different stance. That yes, this is. Let's try to talk about like on soccer, right? You know Messi, right? You know Ronaldo, right? Those players they ignore some rules, right? Because obviously soccer is about you play as a team, but since they have their ability so much higher than the rest, or at least they have at some point, because now they are kind of getting old. And it's the only place that at 30 you cannot do the same things that you do at like 25 or whatever, because it's soccer and it takes a toll on your body, right? And you need to have like a really strong, like be fitness real your fitness really streamlined, right? And because of mechanical superiority on his end, obviously gonna take a more aggressive stance, and that's what good players should do. Is just like if they know that the adversaries are not as strong. That's why some games are just, especially battle royales. Sometimes are boring as fuck. It's just like because everybody's almost at same level. Of course, there is some that gonna, but that is the battle royale aspect too, because it's always a. But since they are going to be like at more or less at same level, the number of fights will be less, right? Unless there is a team that is so dominant that just take on everybody, right? And even taking on everybody is careful, right? But this player, well, seems like to have better aim mechanics, so he takes a more aggressive stance, right? Just like the natural thing to do, smarter.
Or of what makes a player great. Would Simple be better if he took the engagements that a player like Crystal takes? Obviously not. That doesn't mean Crystal should take different engagements, it means that Simple's aim allows him to utilize his game sense in a different manner. I actually have a pet theory that this is a large part of why players often seem to fall off a cliff in skill as they get older. It's not that their reaction or hand eye coordination gets significantly worse over just a few years, it's that they get slightly worse due to aging or more likely due to a slight change in life priorities, and these players struggle to reinvent themselves when they find that they need to adjust the distance they hold their crosshair from the corner, the angles they're able to play, and the engagements they're able to comfortably.
And basically, this is not because of age. This is because they are not like. Wait, what? Thank you for the follow, Evak, Donna. Basically, it's not because it's age. It's just because they don't realize that things change, and by not changing themselves, because they do things in a certain way and keep doing it. It's just like they don't change, and that's what I talk about. Aim for most part. Came across your stream. Maybe I can help. Got some graphics. Thank you, but not thank you. And continue. Uh, so while they aging, they are not finding new ways to play, right? Because their ways to play tend to 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 be the same, and the younger people just came across with new play styles and new things they learn, because everybody like it just like they learn new things, right? Or do probably saw things that these older players are not seeing, because they basically, I think it's just not studying other teams, right? Because sometimes or they study and the the relearning, or they not doing the relearning and study other teams. Obviously, pro teams nowadays they study everything, but it comes across with it comes and count what they change and how they change it, because sometimes teams talk about game style, right? This is the game style of my team, right? And when I saw this most actually on League of Legends, when I heard about a team that have a game style, and I was like, it's so. But the strategy, if you apply the wrong strategy against a team that using this strategy, of course the other teams will be like, normally they have mechanical, and League is like, to change is kind of harder than CS:GO or shooters. But for most parts, it's not the age factor. It's not their like reflexes or something like that. It's just like the fact that they not changing like the ways they play, right? And it's kind of hard when you get results, but you start getting less results. Yeah, as a pro player, probably when you come to an age that it doesn't matter anymore. You just don't give a fuck, right? You just on your team, and probably at that age you just like saying like, well, I just heard enough, and I don't care about that. It's just like what I think about when aim aging and declining in as a player, because there is no reason to a guy like a 30 that plays CS:GO is worse player than a guy at 25, right? Or 20s or 18. There is no reason. There is no reason. Only just because the guy probably just like is sitting back and not trying hard. Because when you are in your 20s, you are trying hard.
Comfortably take with a high percentage of winning. If we were to take a look at a player that has stuck around in the pro scene for years and years, I think it's very likely you'll find that they've adapted at least slightly, unless their device. This has actually been something that I've noticed as a fundamental change when trading between two players on a team I was coaching a few seasons ago. We traded our very low fragging IGL out for a player that some of you may have heard of, Swisher. The most notable change was on T-side overpass defaults
Actually, if
outside of
I
B.
just need your
Rather than
follow.
replicate what the
Be
previous player had
honest,
been doing on
my
defaults,
graphics
holding
are
very
fine.
passive outside of
My
monster,
boots are
essentially
well.
trying not to
I already
die,
decided
Swisher's
it.
aim allowed him to play a more dynamic and aggressive style, often taking a bit of space on the map on rounds where he was alone. Of course, occasionally this would get him punished, but on average it would give our team significantly more map control, and it created a new dynamic the team could use to our advantage. To be honest, the team still kinda sucked. But the addition of Swisher, a player that wasn't an extreme upgrade in terms of game sense, though a casual observer would likely think that, added a dynamic that did significantly increase our T-side win rate on the map. The story here isn't that he was a much smarter player, it's that his aim allowed him to utilize his game sense in a different way, while the previous player knew that his best bet was simply to hold monster and try not to die. Anyways, back on topic. Aim and game sense are pretty hard to separate, so let's take a look at a couple of
And that is here one thing that is funny, right? The teams that take the and this is go for every sport that I played or watched. The teams that play aggressive, they tend to win, right? Of course, there is the times that you get punished to getting more aggressive, but the the win ratio just increases. You can be more aggressive, right? I mean, if you're better, you're just gonna be more aggressive by nature. But you know, when you just play like the other guys and you just try to not die, it's fucked up, right? You actually have to play aggressive on this type of games, right? To when you have the that small advantage that sometimes it's just a mechanical skill or a bit of game games a bit of better game sense, right? That's funny part.
of plays from the king of don't play like this himself, Simple, and see if there's a lot of validity to that claim. How much game sense does Simple really have? Well, I've already kind of answered that myself in a different video. Maybe you would have seen it if you'd been subscribed. Go
Hey,
ahead.
shut up.
Oh, wait. The round I want to take a look at here is from Navi versus Astralis, round number 9. The beginning of the round here isn't that important, but we end up in a spot where Simple and Electronic are in a 2v2 retake versus Magisk and Dupree. Rather than play passive and allow Electronic to make his way closer forward, Simple takes an aggressive stance and phases through the coffin smoke, getting aggressive early with some information as to their locations. Because of his confidence in his ability to win the gunfight while going through that smoke, Simple manages to find a timing where he can catch Magisk off guard, and then lose the round. But regardless, this is a play where he managed to catch an opponent off guard with the timing that he managed because of his confidence in his aim. This is where things really get murky in the aim versus game sense debate. It's not that someone else couldn't have made that play, it's that they may not have had the confidence in their ability to win.
And that's other thing that I don't know if I talked about. No, I talked about before, but this video allows me to actually have some backup on what I'm saying. It's just like most of the aim will be on your confidence, right? And this is things that it's like it's bits of pieces of what I implement on my course now on the self development part of my course. It's just like your confidence will determine so much of what how good your aim will be. It's just like almost gonna determine everything, right? Because if you are not confident that you can evolve and can be like better at aim, you're not. Straight up, you're not. You're gonna hit the ceiling and you're not gonna pass the ceiling because if you're not confident enough, it's like you gonna give up easily. So that's a big part of it. And like you heard in this guy, there is some things that you're not gonna do if you're not
In the
confident
gun
enough.
duel to play as aggressively as he did there and catch the player off guard, new box that wasn't ready for the timing. Okay, so basically I've done a good job of muddying the waters, aim and game sense, who even knows? The answer to this question really doesn't matter all that much, but in my opinion, you do need to turn this into a bit of a formula. The way I think of this is to understand that your aim and game sense typically likely need to reach a baseline minimum, and at that point there is a lot of play on the in-between. No matter how good your aim is, you have to have a baseline competent level of game sense or you'll never be able to go pro. At the extreme, for an example, if you're running in looking the wrong direction, unless you're spin botting, you're never going to get any kills. unless you're playing happy in 2015. Similarly, if you run up behind someone and miss every shot, you'll die as well. With this in mind, if we can rate your aim and game sense on a scale from 0 to 100, you likely need both of these to be at a baseline within 15 to 20% of your opponents for the other to even come into play, and from there you have game on. If your aim is good enough to at least win 60-40 engagements, then you're talking. Anyways, this is just a long video to say nobody cares. Head on over to my Patreon, patreon.com/VCSGO, sub to the Patreon, sub to the channel, like the video. Peace out.
So yeah, it's like just those pieces and pieces that it's not talked that much on while I'm training, of course, but I take